Well, fears are growing that the conflict could spill over into neighboring countries such as Moldova. The UN has called for calm there after a series of explosions targeted radio masts used to broadcast Russian programs in the breakaway territory of Trans-Dniester. The area is backed by Russia and has been under the control of separatist authorities since a war with Moldova some 30 years ago. Around 1,500 Russian troops are based in the region. And let's take a closer look now at the incidents that have been raising tensions there in the recent days.
2 radio towers used to broadcast Russian news now scrap metal. The blast site in Moldova is just 5 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. So far, no one has claimed responsibility.
Our analysis shows there are tensions between various forces who are interested in destabilizing this region. This is a complex and tense situation, but we will remain vigilant and will take all necessary measures to prevent escalation, to strengthen our security, and to protect our citizens. We must remain calm, stay informed using verified sources, and avoid distributing false information.
The explosion of the radio towers was the second unclaimed attack this week in the Moldovan separatist region of Transnistria. The first was on the state security ministry in Tiraspol. Tensions in the region have been high since Russia invaded Ukraine. Moscow has suggested it wants to create a land corridor along southern Ukraine between Transnistria and the Russian-controlled territories in eastern Ukraine. It's believed Russia keeps around 1,500 troops in Transnistria, and analysts say the area could be used to launch an attack on Ukraine. The region remained pro-Russian after the collapse of the Soviet Union, but the international community considers it part of Moldova. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he believed the recent attacks were orchestrated by Moscow and that his country is prepared for any offensive from that direction. As for the Russian troops that have been constantly stationed in the temporarily occupied territories of Moldova, in particular in Transnistria, we know that they're in constant combat readiness, waiting for an order. We know their power. The Ukrainian armed forces are prepared for them and are not afraid of them. Moldovan authorities have raised the country's terror alert to its highest level. They're worried the war in Ukraine could spill across the border into Transnistria and then to the rest of the country.
Russian-backed separatists in Transnistria now also claim that shots have been fired into its territory from Ukraine. Earlier, I spoke to Yuriy Sak. He's an advisor to the Ukrainian defense minister, and I asked him what he knows about the recent incident in Moldova.
Now, our authorities, our military command, our intelligence services have already made an official statement saying that these are provocations. And of course, this has nothing to do with Ukrainian armed forces. This is not part of Ukraine's interest. Ukraine is fighting a war for its own land, for its peace, for the peace in Europe and the future of freedom in Europe. So we are not surprised that Russians have done these provocations. Of course, it has to be studied and verified. But at the moment, what we can confirm with certainty that, of course, Ukraine has nothing to do with these incidents in Transnistria.
All right, so you're saying that these are false flag attacks. How concerned are you about a new front line emerging there, though?
Well, look, we have seen the statements by the Russian authorities and officials that, Transnistria is part of their military objectives. And of course, they have used Transnistria in the past with the view to, as logistics support for their armed forces. And, we wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to move in and do it there. But our military experts have said many times that for Russia to open yet another front would only mean it will only speed up the defeat of Russia, because at the moment, Russia wanted to conquer Ukraine in 3 days, in 1 week. It never happened. They've had to retreat from Kyiv. They've had to retreat from Chernihiv. Of course, they're now focusing on the east of Ukraine and the south, but they have not had any considerable military success or gains. So from this perspective, which is possible, of course, they may consider opening another front line in Moldova, but this wouldn't make any sense. And I would repeat, it will only speed up their defeat.
Looking at the south, the Russian army claims it has made significant territorial gains in the last couple of days, including the entire Kherson region. Can you confirm that?
Well, in Kherson, what we have to understand is that, of course, Russia is trying to set up a fake referendum and to announce the establishment of the so-called probably Kherson People's Republic, which is the tactics that they've used in 2014 in the east of Ukraine, right? But at the same time, even today, we've seen that Ukrainian population of Kherson, they went out to a peaceful demonstration. They are not supportive of any of these initiatives. They are requiring and requesting and demanding the Russian aggressors to leave their hometown. And these are the sort of feelings that the vast majority of Ukrainian population in the south of Ukraine has. So we are confident that it's only a matter of time to liberate those cities and those regions. And of course, for this, we need more heavy weaponry from our international partners.
What can you tell us about the situation in Mariupol, especially that of the fighters and the civilians reportedly still holding out in the steel plant there?
Well, the situation in Mariupol, which is a city that used to be 500,000 people city before the war, now there's over 100,000 still left there under occupation and under continuous bombs and missiles and artillery shelling. And of course, there are over 1,000 civilians still trapped in Azovstal steelworks. There are there also about more than 500 wounded Ukrainian warriors, and there are also those warriors who continue to defend Azovstal and Mariupol. And of course, the situation is extremely difficult, but at the same time, we are seeing no willingness on the part of Russia to at least establish evacuation corridors. They've ignored the pleas of the UN. They've ignored every offer made by the Ukrainian side. They continue to throw everything they have on Mariupol and on Azovstal, right? Despite the words of the president of Russia that the offensive of Azovstal will discontinue, this never happened. They haven't stopped for an hour. The shelling continues, missiles strikes continue, artillery continues, infantry continues to attack. So the situation is pretty much the same as it was for the last 3 months now.
All right. There was a meeting of defense officials in Germany yesterday trying to coordinate efforts to support you. Where does the international military and financial aid that has already been pledged to you leave you in terms of defense capabilities?
Well, during the last 2 weeks, we have seen an important shift in the approach of our international partners to the question of providing Ukraine with the required military assistance. We have said from the very beginning that for us to be more efficient in fighting this war, we need heavy artillery, we need tanks, we need anti-aircraft, anti-air defense systems, we need anti-warship missiles, we need combat aircraft. Now, we have begun receiving certain types of these weaponry from our international partners, and we are receiving now heavy artillery, howitzers. Yesterday, the German Minister of Defense made a pledge about providing Ukraine with more tanks, but this is still insufficient.
And I can now speak to Dana Alexandra Shele. She's the head of DW's Romanian service. Welcome. No one has claimed responsibility for the recent blast in Transnistria. What are the different sides saying?
Transnistria even claims that shots have been fired from Ukraine. And yesterday, the leader of the separatist government in Transnistria suggested that traces of the explosion also lead to Ukraine and that Ukraine wanted to destabilize the region, and he asked Ukraine to investigate all this. But the official position of the Moldovan government of President Maia Sandu is that pro-war forces inside Transnistria are behind these attacks, and that they want to destabilize the situation in the region. Ukraine accused Russia of trying to create unrest in Transnistria, and Zelensky, Ukraine's president, also said that Ukrainian forces were prepared for a possible attack from Transnistria. And the situation becomes more and more tense. Today, our correspondents from Moldova also reported about gunshots near one of the largest ammunition depots in Eastern Europe, which is located in Transnistria, near the village of Kopasna. And this is only a few kilometers from the Ukrainian border. It is like an explosive inheritance in every way from the Soviet era. And there are about
give us some more
20,000 tons
context
of
that situation there, on that explosive inheritance, as you were calling it. What is the separatist movement they're aiming to achieve, and what's Transnistria's status within Moldova at this point?
The situation is very complicated because these pro-Russian separatists actually split from the Republic of Moldova 30 years ago, after a brief war when they were also supported by Russia. And the problem is that the separatist region does not recognize the government in Chisinau, the authority of the government in Chisinau.
And what does this mean, this conflict possibly shifting to Transnistria? What does it mean for Moldova's difficult position, trying to balance its relationship between Russia and the West, and of course fearing that after Ukraine, they might be next?
Well, the situation has been difficult for Moldova for a very long time, actually, because they have this frozen conflict with Transnistria. But it becomes more and more tense now after the start of the invasion in Ukraine, actually. Our correspondents talked to many people in Moldova, for example, who said that they feared the Russian war spilling over to Moldova, already at the end of February. For example, one teacher from a small village close to Transnistria said that she was afraid that someday or some morning Russian tanks could be in her backyard, actually. And also experts, security experts and intellectuals we spoke to also said that the risk is very high of the war extending, of course. And also a senior military official from Russia said that... Sorry?
No, I almost cut you off there. I wanted to let you finish.
Okay, so a senior military official from Russia also said last week that the Russians in Transnistria were being oppressed. So which of course causes alarm because it reminds everyone about what Russia said concerning Russians in the separatist republics of Eastern Ukraine.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Dana Alexandra Sherle. She's the head of DW's Romanian service.